Welcome back to another episode of Archie's Sonic Character Files as we explore the histories of the inhabitants on planet Mobius. In this episode, we take a look at the history of the fire-breathing freedom fighter known as Dulcy the Dragon, along with some other characters like her abusive boyfriend Zan and her own group of freedom fighters, the Shijin warriors. Ah, poor Dulcy. Not only was she a neglected character in Sonic Set AM, but also neglected for this series, as I kept pushing her episode back to focus on other episodes. So before we are done with the Year of the Dragon, I wanted to give her the spotlight she deserves. Dulcy would make her first appearance in Archie Sonic issue 29. Dragons used to live a peaceful life on Mobius, until they were captured and roboticized by the original Robotnik. While her mother Sabina suffered that same fate, Dulcy would survive and join the Freedom Fighters. One day, she and Sonic had trashed one of Robotnik's hovercrafts, and inside, they find a portable de-roboticizer device that has enough energy for a one-time use, and they grab it before the hovercraft self-destructs. After this, the Freedom Fighters would go on a mission at Robotropolis, where Sally volunteers to be roboticized while having a Nero Overrider device, so that she could still maintain her free will. So they go with the mission, and it didn't go as well as they had hoped, and the mindless robot is ordered to roboticize the Freedom Fighters. Fortunately, Dulcy was snooping around Robotropolis and came to the rescue by using the de-roboticizer device to save Sally. Then she destroyed the roboticizer controls with her fire breath, along with scorching Robotnik in the process. Later, she would assist the Freedom Fighters during the Battle Royale special, where the Freedom Fighters and the Chaotix duke it out against each other, over some confusion regarding the Sword of Acorns. She would later have somewhat of an important role during the Operation Endgame story arc. In this story, Sonic is framed for supposedly killing Sally, and is now a wanted criminal on the run from Jeffrey St. John. Tired from all the running, Sonic calls on Dulcy to help him get to the floating island, only for the dragon to be knocked out by the island's guardian, Knuckles the Echidna. After some fighting, Dulcy managed to stop things from getting too ugly. She claims that dragons never lie, can sense the purity of truth, or something like that. Basically, she says that Sonic would never try to do any harm towards Sally, and this manages to convince Jeffrey to release Sonic, so that they can figure out on what's really going on. After this story, she would make a few more smaller appearances. In issue 68, she helps destroy some meteors falling down towards Robotropolis. In issue 74, she helps Sonic and the Freedom Fighters make their way into orbit to try and find the missing Robians. And in issue 77, she helps Sonic and Sally deal with some robots from the second Robotnik, then later takes them back to Knothole. We wouldn't be seeing Dulcy in action for a while, until the two-part story Crouching Hedgehog, Hidden Dragon. Sonic and the Freedom Fighters are summoned to the underground civilization of Station Square, to deal with a fierce dragon named Zan that's causing trouble. At first, Sonic tries to deal with the dragon himself, but it proves too much for him. So now he, the Freedom Fighters, and Team Sigma Alpha 2 travel to Pyro Island, believing it to be the location where Zan usually resides. After going through a waterfall, they not only find Zan, but also find Dulcy, who reveals that Zan is her boyfriend. Then a lot of stuff happens. The Sigma Alpha team try to attack both dragons, Dulcy tries to calm down Zan, only to be flung out of the cave. We find out that her damaged arm was actually from Zan and not the Overlanders, where despite all the abuse, Dulcy still loves him. And that it ends with the Sigma Alpha team laying down landmines to destroy the cave. Sonic was able to make it out alive, while Zan wasn't so lucky, leaving Dulcy to mourn the loss of her mate. The next time she would have a more active role again would be in issues 155 and 156, in the two-part story, The Price of Flame. It starts off with a surprise party for Dulcy to celebrate all the time she helped out with the Freedom Fighters, but when she's asked to light the bonfire, she instead flies away. This is where we get to see Dulcy's backstory be expanded upon. After the original Robotnik began his reign of terror, she, along with the rest of the surviving dragons, went into hiding from the outside world, now living inside of a giant volcano known as Vesuvio. Now the dragons have recolonized and are forbidden to explore the outside world, but Dulcy missed the old days of the outside world, not to mention developing claustrophobia, so she would sneak out to fly in freedom. One day she would meet Sonic and Sally for the first time, and stop some SWAT bots from attacking them. She would later join the Freedom Fighters to help out in battle. Soon after this, she would be discovered for breaking the rules by their leader, Glint, and as punishment, she was exiled from Vesuvio, but not before replacing her black nose ring with a magic gold nose ring, taking away her fire breath ability in the process. Back in the present time, Dulcy decides to travel back to Vesuvio, in the hopes that she'll be pardoned after all these years of thwarting Robotnik. But she'd have to wait a while after being knocked out, as it turns out the second Robotnik was secretly following her to find the rest of the dragons, and sends his army of mecha dragons to finish what his predecessor failed to do by roboticizing all the other dragons. During the chaos, Dulcy wakes up and manages to save a kid named Sparky, but is quickly taken away and chained to a rock, as Glint isn't too happy to see her again. Fortunately, one of the mecha dragons lands on her during the battle, which not only breaks away the chains, but also the gold nose ring. Now with her fire breath restored, she helps the other dragons defeat the remaining mecha dragons. Glint is grateful for Dulcy's help, but the dragon girl is sad, knowing that she'll never be reunited with her mother again, as she was one of the many roboticized dragons. But Glint reassures her that dragons never truly die, and will be reborn sometime in the future. The story ends with Dulcy now given a full pardon from Glint, her black nose ring is restored, and she is now the official ambassador to the dragons. That was pretty much the end for Dulcy's time in the old timeline, though she would make a few more cameos, like showing up to Bunny and Antoine's wedding, being captured by Robotnik during the destruction of Knothole, and later being rescued and teleported to New Mobotropolis. Despite the Super Genesis wave erasing everything from the old timeline, she would be carried over into the post-reboot era, and be given a new backstory. In this new timeline, Dulcy was born and raised in Eurasia, specifically in the Eastern Forest clan. But since the other clans never really got along, Dulcy was fed up with all the feuding, and decided to run away, where she ended up on Westside Island. There, she would meet Sonic, Sally, and Tails for the first time. At first, she apologizes for intruding their homeland, but Sonic and the others are chill about it, and they quickly become friends. Inspired by their meeting, she would travel back to Eurasia years later, in the hopes of convincing the other clans to join forces to stop Dr. Robotnik. Which brings us to the present time, where she is now the leader of a small group of freedom fighters, known as the Shijin Warriors, with its members being Jian the Tiger, Bunker the Tortoise, and Cinder the Pheasant. Sonic and the freedom fighters arrive in her homeland to find the last Gaia Key to help restore the shattered planet. The two teams head off to the temple grounds, where Sonic and Chip deal with the now corrupted Gaia Phoenix, while the rest of the freedom fighters deal with Robotnik's soldiers, led by Conquering Storm. It looks as though their efforts are no match for her side of the Egg Army, but Dulcy reveals that they were just a distraction, giving Sonic and Chip enough time to restore the Gaia Phoenix, who then flies away to destroy their base. After this story, Dulcy would make a few more cameos, such as seeing her with her team volunteering to help the freedom fighters finally restore the planet, witness one of the Gaia temples being summoned by Dr. Robotnik, and she is last seen in issue 287, where she and her team are happy to know that the planet is restored. And that concludes the history of Dulcy, the Dragon Fighter. She's okay. I feel like she's a little more mature in Archie Sonic, seeing as how she only uses her Fire Breath ability, and doesn't ramble on about her mom whenever she's in a daze. It always felt like Dulcy was just one of those characters where the writers didn't know what to do with her, especially with her origins in Sonic SatAM. I get the idea about introducing another female character to the main cast, but the way they handled this character wasn't that great. Like, you have this dragon who can fly, breathe both fire and ice, and even sporting a pouch to carry things. You'd think they would have come up with a lot of cool things for her to do, but no, she just ends up being the "she's just there" character. Or only showing up to be the freedom fighters' main source of transportation. Of course, it doesn't help that she was never given a proper introduction. I kinda get the impression that she's one of the least popular characters from Sonic SatAM. Whenever I see fan art of the show, she's rarely present. I know she has some fans, but I wish they just handled her better. Now, for a while, I considered the Archie Sonic version of Dulcy to be better, but after working on this video, I've had some second thoughts. In fact, I think she's had it worse in Archie Sonic than in SatAM Sonic. To be fair, they were nice enough to have her introduction start off with a brief origin story, and despite issue 29 having some flaws, it's a decent story. Especially since Dulcy gets to save the day at the end. But after that story, it was back to how she was treated like in SatAM, only showing up to be nothing more than a plot device. Especially during the endgame story arc. Oh boy. If you thought Sonic Frontiers had a lazy get-out-of-jail-free card with that one particular scene with Tails, then you ain't seen nothing yet. Where Dulcy convinces Jeffrey to stop hunting down Sonic as a criminal by just saying that dragons don't lie. Yeah, that came out of nowhere, and it's never brought up again. It's like the writers were so busy planning out the epic climax and Robotnik's death that they forgot about trying to clear up that bit in the story, and just made something up on the spot. And then we have her relationship with Zan. Oof, definitely one of her low points in the comics. I will give some credit to Carl Boilers in trying to do something new for Dulcy, but the execution really didn't turn out that great, and it's really sad to see Dulcy be treated so harshly after she barely did anything for the series. Especially when domestic violence is already a very touchy subject to get into. Yeah, the second half of this story goes by really fast. They find the dragon's lair, they suddenly reveal that Dulcy's in an abusive relationship, and by the end, they just kill Zan. Yeah, this story feels like a sped-up version of that one Family Guy episode involving Quagmire's sister and her abusive boyfriend. Could they have handled the themes better? Maybe. Would I have liked to have seen Zan to come back in some way? Not really. The guy's just a one-dimensional asshole. Now to clarify, I don't think they should have ended it by just flat out killing the guy, because that's just going overboard. Just have him show up in that one story, fight Sonic, Dulcy gets help from the Freedom Fighters to stand up for herself, and tells Zan off, and then he flies away, never to be seen again. At least that's just me spitballing ideas. I'm not really an expert on writing a story with these kind of themes. I should also mention that around this time, we started seeing Dulcy with a lighter green color to her design. And I'm not really a fan of the new colors they went with. Though funny enough, there does exist some production material of Dulcy, showing her with some early color designs before they went with the final look. When it was Mike Gallagher's turn to give Dulcy the spotlight, he fared better than the others, expanding on her backstory and helping out her dragon kind. The only problem is that this issue gives a lot of contradicting details about the character, and it all revolves around that nose ring of hers. As you might have seen, the coloring of her nose ring was black, but then throughout most of her appearances, it was changed to gold, and sometimes they'd go back and forth on that detail. So, this story tries to explain that she originally had a black nose ring, but was later given the gold nose ring when she was exiled, and her fire breath ability was taken away. But when you actually piece together her previous appearances leading up to this point, it really makes no sense. Like, she mentions trying to paint it black to feel better, and then the editor's box says that she's referring to the cover of issue 49. Okay, that doesn't really help because in the actual story, her nose ring is gold. It also mentions that Sonic Super Special Issue 2 happens before she was exiled, which would make some sense, until you remember that she was in the first Sonic Super Special that takes place before this, where despite having a gold nose ring, she can breathe fire, somehow. And then there's her cameo in issue 68, breathing fire when she's not supposed to, especially when her nose ring is colored white for some reason. Maybe she just ate a lot of hot chili peppers those days. And to add more insult to injury, despite the story ending with Dulcy getting her black nose ring back, it goes back to being gold again in her next few cameos. Jason Jensen, I enjoyed your coloring contribution to Archie Sonic most of the time, but this is just dumb. Like, you did the coloring for a story that was all about trying to explain the confusion of the black and gold nose rings for Dulcy, and despite ending the story with her black nose ring being restored, you went and made it gold again? Come on. Anyway, to wrap this up, I'm sure Mike Gallagher had good intentions when coming up with that story idea about the origins of Dulcy's nose rings, but at the end of the day, it only leaves us with more questions than answers. And it just makes me wish that they just left it as a simple retcon, like, oh yeah, Dulcy's always had a gold nose ring since the beginning. Keep the whole deal about her fire breath being taken away, and just change it to, oh, her flame was taken away and stored in the sacred lantern, or some other kind of magical thingamabob. Now for a few quick fun facts. In the complete Sonic Comic Encyclopedia, it's revealed that she's currently spending her days by traveling the world. I guess that would explain her lack of appearances. And in her old data files in issue 107, it's revealed that her full name is Dulcinea. Pretty sure that was never mentioned in Sonic Sat AM, unless it's buried in some old production notes. But yeah, definitely one of the more obscure facts about this character. Because outside of the data files, the only time that name was ever brought up was in issue 156. And now we have her new canon counterpart, where Ian Flynn finally gets to write her. Yeah, it's quite surprising that this is the only time he got to write for Dulcy. She's a mixture of being calm and cracking some jokes with her friends, and other times she's very nervous and trying to show Sally that she can be a good leader. Kinda reminds me of how the new timeline made Sally struggle with her leadership roles as well. Even so, I like this new take on Dulcy, and I really dig the more sleeker redesign, going for more of that Eastern Chinese dragon look. Although I feel like I'm in the minority, because I've rarely seen anyone say anything positive about Dulcy's redesign. How ironic considering her lack of popularity before. It is sad that despite Dulcy finally finding her footing and a better purpose, the series would be quickly cancelled after that. Ouch, poor gal just can't catch a break. Well, at least she ended on a high note. As for the Shijin warriors, there's not much to say, but it's worth pointing out that they're the only all-female freedom fighters group in Archie Sonic. And issue 282 was nice enough to provide some brief info about these characters. Like Bunker is the calm one that packs quite the punch. Cinder is basically the Cream the Rabbit of the group, just a bit more energetic. And then there's Qian, a gal who used to be part of the Eggman Empire, but later decided to leave and join Dulcy's group. She's definitely my favorite member. Outside of rocking an awesome design, her backstory is very interesting. I would have loved to see this character get a lot more screen time. Like, how was she able to bypass the cybernetic installments where their bodies would freeze up if they decide to disobey the Eggman Empire? I could really see this gal get her own spin-off story, much like Clove and Cassia, and it really sucks that we really didn't see much of her. Oh well, I guess there's still fan art. Well, that takes care of this character file, so until then, I got a juice!
Do not protect Sonic the Hedgehog.
I will protect Sonic the Hedgehog.
He killed Sally and is a traitor.
He is not a traitor.
How do you know?
Because I said so.
Okay, I believe you.